Coming up on New Day at Arirang, South Korea is on course to report an additional 2,000 COVID-19 cases on Wednesday, after a number of days sharply below that mark. Such a sharp uptick is sure to concern health authorities. The Nobel Prize in Physics goes jointly to 3 scientists for what it calls their pioneering work, predicting global warming and understanding complex physical systems. Plus, glitz and glamour returns to Korea's southeastern city of Busan this evening. More than 220 films from 70 countries showcased at the 26th Busan International Film Festival. Stay tuned for these stories and more.
Hello and welcome to the Wednesday edition of New Day at Arirang. It's 8 a.m. Korea time on October 6th. I'm Kim Mo-gan. Thank you for joining us.
It's wonderful to have you with us. I'm Mark Bream. Over the next hour, we will take a look at the big news stories of the day and also get expert insights on the issues facing not only Korea, but the rest of the world. But today, we're going to start with the COVID-19 situation in South Korea. The daily tally for Wednesday is expected to be back above, unfortunately, the 2,000 mark yet again.
That's right. Health authorities are concerned over the post-holiday surge from the recent 3-day weekend. For more on this, we have our Choi Won-jung in the studio with us. Good morning, Won-jung.
Good morning.
Morning, Won-jung. So the official daily figure will be announced in the next couple of hours, as it normally is here in South Korea. Considering what we saw in terms of new infections between midnight and 9 p.m. on Tuesday, what kind of forecast are we looking for today?
And sure, like you said, today's daily tally is not out yet, but daily new COVID-19 cases will climb back to over 2,000 again, maybe less than that. It's because of the post-holiday surge and because fewer tests were conducted over the 3-day weekend. As far as cases go, from midnight to 9 p.m. on Tuesday, 1,871 cases were reported, and that's 356 cases more than at the same time on the previous day. Among local infections, 74% were from the Greater Seoul area. But again, this could change in the next 2 hours or so. As you know, another 3-day holiday is coming this weekend, putting the health authorities on alert.
Now, Won-jung, let's move on to vaccinations. Yesterday, South Korea's teenagers aged between 16 to 17 have begun booking their reservations for COVID-19 vaccines, provided they have the parents' consent. Right. How did this go?
Yeah, so just briefly, South Korea's health authorities they start taking vaccine reservation from 16 and 17 on Tuesday, which is yesterday. So far, no major hiccups have been reported. It takes just 2 minutes for them to book their shot, and website is stable right now. Again, they need a parental consent to get the vaccine.
Of course, because they aren't technically adults yet. So for such a big decision, they need to get consent from their parents. What about other vaccine reservations? We hear some other groups will be eligible to make reservations in the near future.
Right. So the pregnant women are up next, and starting this Friday. And according to the KDCA, the pregnant women who would like to get the COVID-19 vaccine can apply online from 8 p.m. Korea time. They will be getting mRNA vaccines such as Moderna or Pfizer. Now, what's really interesting is that despite many feeling hesitant about the vaccine, the South Korea is not only country that is urging vaccination for pregnant women. The U.S., the UK, Australia, and Canada all recommend they get vaccinated. It's because they believe the benefits of a vaccination outweigh the risks.
Now, Won-jung, before we let you go, can you tell us more about this potential COVID-19 antibody treatment from AstraZeneca? So
do you remember yesterday we sort of briefly talked about the Johnson & Johnson Janssen's is seeking FDA approval for its booster shot. So another pharmaceutical company, AstraZeneca, is also seeking FDA approval for its COVID-19 antibody treatment. It's called the AZD7442. The treatment is delivered as a shot and prevents the COVID-19 symptoms with a 77% efficacy. The company said the primary use would be for people with lower immunity after vaccination or people who weren't able to get the vaccine due to their health issues. And the UK drug maker is also talking to governments from the other countries to provide this treatment.
Okay, well, hopefully that works, because there are certain groups within society, those with serious health issues, that are just unable to get the vaccine.
Right, like
for
underlying conditions.
Yeah, serious
right.
underlying conditions or whatnot. Wonjong, as always, thank you very much for your report, and I believe we'll be speaking to you again this time tomorrow. Thank you.
Yes, we will.
Now, it's that time of the year when the Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences hands out Nobel Prizes to those who have made groundbreaking contributions in their respective fields.
On Tuesday, 3 scientists were jointly awarded the 2021 Nobel Prize in Physics. The winners, who hail from 3 different countries, won for their work to advance knowledge about the world's climate. Ji-young reports.
3 scientists on Tuesday won the 2021 Nobel Prize in Physics for their outstanding work on understanding complex physical systems, including Earth's changing climate.
The Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences has today decided to award the 2021 Nobel Prize in Physics for groundbreaking contributions to our understanding of complex physical systems.
One half of the prize was jointly presented to Japanese-born American Shukuro Manabe from Princeton University and Klaus Hasselmann from Germany from the Max Planck Institute for Meteorology. The 2 90-year-old scientists received the award for physically modeling Earth's climate and how humanity influences it. Giorgio Parisi from Italy at Sapienza University of Rome won the other half of the award for his contributions to finding out hidden rules behind seemingly disordered materials and random processes and swirls in gases or liquids from atomic to planetary scales. The Royal Swedish Academy said this year's prize recognizes new methods for describing the hidden rules as well as predicting their long-term behavior. The prestigious award comes with a gold medal and 10 million Swedish kronor, which is roughly $1.1 million. This is the second Nobel of the season after the Medicine Prize on Monday to 2 U.S. scientists. As per last year, the laureates will receive their medals and diplomas in their home countries, as a banquet in Stockholm is not being held because of the pandemic. Last year, 3 scientists won the Nobel Physics Prize for their discoveries regarding black holes. Awards for chemistry, literature, peace, and economics will follow in the coming days. Ji-young, Arirang News.
U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen has again warned that the U.S. government is hurtling towards an unprecedented government default in about 2 weeks' time. Speaking on a network news show Tuesday, Yellen said it's time for lawmakers to approve a raise to the debt ceiling. Kim Hyo-san reports.
U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen is again warning that a recession is unavoidable if Congress fails to address the U.S. debt ceiling. Speaking on CNBC Tuesday, she explained that a failure of lawmakers to act would be, quote, catastrophic. Yellen said October 18th is the deadline, stressing that it's essential the ceiling be raised before then. Saying U.S. Treasury securities have long been regarded as the safest financial asset on earth, she insisted that putting that in question could result in a catastrophic outcome. President Biden has also called on lawmakers to raise the debt limit in order to avoid the country's first-ever default. Currently, the Treasury Department is using so-called emergency extraordinary measures to pay down the country's receipts since reaching the last debt ceiling at the end of July. Such measures enable the department to both conserve cash and draw down certain accounts without issuing new bonds. However, the Treasury estimates that such measures are forecast to be unsustainable by mid-October. Economists also warn a default would lead to a widespread damage, including a spike in interest rates, a potential delay in Social Security checks to some 50 million senior citizens, as well as a pay delay for members of the U.S. Armed Services. While both Republicans and Democrats share the same view that the debt ceiling issue must be addressed, they remain split on how to do it. Kim Hyo-san, Arirang News.
It's now time for our new corner On Point, where we speak with various experts in their field to dig deeper into the biggest news stories in the spotlight right now. In late September, US Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen told lawmakers on Capitol Hill that the US will hit its debt limit by October 18th, as we just heard in that report there. She also said that's the date the Treasury will run out of its so-called extraordinary measures, meaning the Treasury will then have a very limited ability to manage its cash flow.
Yes. Now, these remarks come as Congress has yet to agree on a bill to raise the debt ceiling through December 22nd, 2022. For an expert's take on this precarious situation, we are joined on Skype by Oh Jin-seok, Professor of Business Administration at Sookmyung Women's University. Professor, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Now, first off, President Biden this week called out Republicans for opposing any raise to the debt ceiling, calling their current opposition dangerous and reckless. Now, how bad would it be for the U.S. and the global economy if the U.S. defaults in less than 2 weeks' time?
First of all, we need to understand the background of U.S. Treasury Secretary's warning. Let's imagine a situation. You are the manager of a manufacturing company, and all the facilities and production processes working on a regular schedule. But on a sudden, the market has changed. Therefore, purchasing order from distributor has dropped down, and then it is unable to make a delivery. What will you do as a manager in this situation? Stop the manufacturing line, give up pink slip to the employees to save cost by reducing risks, or increasing the level of inventory in the warehouse, save time despite the risk taking. This is the situation. Debt ceiling is the maximum affordable level of inventory. Needless to say, because of the COVID-19 pandemic, due to urgency rooted in the prolonged pandemic, there were not many choices left other than liquidity injection. It's like paying workers' wage by getting a loan. Financial support directly to the household and small business in the name of emergency relief fund. The federal debt is at 28.43 trillion, according to the Peter J. Peterson Foundation tracker. What is the response in the market till now? Tech-heavy Nasdaq composite plunged, and the S&P 500 losing, and the Dow Jones Industrial Average retreated. Financial instability has a transmission mechanism spreading toward the real goods market. Energy prices stay high, and then Evergrande crisis in relation to inflation concern. This is expected to linger for a while, generating uncertainty. What a mess. Under this situation, it is hard to make a decision and then worrisome in the expected future.
Yeah, and we wanted to ask you, because this issue of hiking the debt ceiling is hardly new for the US. It comes up every few years, basically. However, it usually does get resolved with the Democrats and the GOP reaching a deal and approving it. It seems to me as if the Republicans just want to make President Biden sweat a touch. But is there anything to suggest this time is any different to previous times?
Economic imbalance are different, and then political imbalance are different this time also. It matters little what amount will be a true debt ceiling. Reaching an agreement of changing the limit, it implies the collective obligation of their decision making. So at this time, whether or not to change the inventory level of the warehouse, in my example, depends on when the market will turn back to normal. Nobody knows. There is a risk of no way out, no way back. Economic viewpoint tells it is likely to start global stagflation. We already know that stagflation is when there is a high inflation with stagnant economic growth. And then Jerome Powell added that the upward pressure on prices could be larger and longer lasting than anticipated, particularly due to supply bottleneck. Growing power supply crunch in China has cut production at factories and triggers a rise in commodity price globally. Production shortage in the first quarter would not only slow growth of the Chinese economy, but also push up the inflation around the world in major economies, including the United States. What about the political viewpoint? President Joe Biden blasted the Republicans for playing Russian roulette with the U.S. economy. The Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act passed the Senate August 18th as the type of financial support, but has yet to pass the House, and Speaker Nancy Pelosi has warned that the House will not approve it unless other conditions to be met. Political impasse over the U.S. debt ceiling concerns deal a hard blow to the President Joe Biden's big spending plan. It might be tough in the later times.
Mm-hmm. Professor, well, the U.S. debt limit currently stands at around $28.5 trillion. If a deal is reached, right, it'll quickly become even more. In your opinion, at what point will the U.S. national debt become unsustainable?
Debt ceiling is not just numbers. It's just the name of a packaged, prepared risk manual book. When the level has changed, the application of risk manual also changes. How to manage the debt ceiling limit is a reflection of trust of the U.S. economic capacity. Think about it. A potato couch can hardly bear the burden of extreme sports because it is based on the belief of affordability and then doability of U.S. risk-taking capacity. Nobody there to say what is the exact number of debt ceiling. But I could suggest a comparable number with $28.5 trillion, considering one of roles of U.S. dollar as means of international settlement in the middle of international trade, which implies the global market capacity of U.S. dollar. According to WHO's statistics, world trade in goods and services amounted to US $22 trillion in 2020, and a 13% decline compared with 2019. If not the COVID-19 pandemic happened, that it is possible to forecast the world trade volume computed total by dollar terms will amount to about $25 trillion in 2020. And we have to add the M1 in the domestic US dollar currency is roughly $16 trillion. In this respect, 28.5 trillion range might be, I might say, that close to the maximum affordability.
Okay, Professor, we did hope to ask you a couple more questions, but unfortunately we're out of time. But we do appreciate your insights on what clearly is a very complex issue. That was Oh Jun-sok, Professor of Business Administration at Sukmyung Women's University, on the fight in the US on raising the debt ceiling. Thank you.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
South Korean President Moon Jae-in has admitted that unification could take some time, but in the meantime, the two Koreas can still cooperate for joint prosperity.
Yeah, the president's remarks on Tuesday came just 24 hours or so after the North restored cross-border communication channels it severed several weeks prior. Kim Dami with this report.
President Moon Jae-in said on Tuesday that the two Koreas should work together for joint prosperity ahead of eventual unification. Speaking at a ceremony to mark the 15th World Korean Day, Moon noted unification may need some time, but the South and the North can still get along with each other.
하지만 우리는 대립할 이유가 없습니다. 체제 경쟁이나 국력의 비교는 이미 오래전에 더 이상 의미가 없어졌습니다. 이제는 함께 번영하는 것이 더욱 중요합니다.
Adding that the division is yet to be overcome, Moon further voiced his dreams of future generations of the 80 million people of the two Koreas and 7.5 million overseas Koreans being able to empathize with each other and unite. Moon's latest remarks signal much willingness to push for cooperative projects with Pyongyang following the recent restoration of inter-Korean communication lines. Also on Tuesday, an official from Seoul's Unification Ministry said South Korea continues to make internal preparations about how inter-Korean issues should be handled through dialogue. When asked about the so-called major tasks that the North's leader Kim Jong-un has urged Seoul to work on, the official said Seoul sees them as issues that need to be solved through dialogue and cooperation between the two sides. Seoul's efforts for inter-Korean dialogue are gearing up as all the inter-Korean hotlines have been back up and running since Monday. South Korea's unification ministry said that on Tuesday, the two Koreas had their two regular phone calls through a separate joint liaison office channel. The defense ministry also confirmed all military hotlines between the South and the North are back on, including the Navy channel set up on an international network for merchant ships, which the North didn't answer the previous day. Kim Da-mi, Arirang News.
The top diplomats of South Korea and the US met in Paris Tuesday for talks on Seoul-Washington relations and issues related to the Korean Peninsula. The meeting between Jong Eun and US Secretary of State Anthony Blinken was held on the sidelines of an OECD meeting. Seoul's foreign ministry said Jong explained that President Moon's recent call for an end-of-war declaration was a, quote, meaningful way to build trust with North Korea. They agreed to closely communicate on the matter. Now it's time for our Global Insight Corner with Oh Soo-young.
Now it's time for Global Insight, where we speak to experts from around the world on issues making headlines. Now, despite North Korea launching a stream of missile tests in recent weeks, inter-Korean relations seem to be getting back on track. The South and North resumed their routine contact over cross-border hotlines this week, renewing hopes of restarting efforts to build peace on the peninsula. Well, over the past month, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has shown a relatively dovish posture towards South Korea, giving the green light to restore the communication lines, while his younger sister hinted that Pyongyang may hold dialogue with the South, but only if it plays its cards right. At the same time, the regime proceeded with its weapons testing and development, boasting of new missile capabilities from railroad carriage systems to hypersonic models. To make sense of these rather mixed messages and whether the recent developments indicate real rapprochement between the South and North, we turn to Evans Revere, Senior Director at the Albright Stonebridge Group, who served as the United States Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for East Asian and Pacific Affairs. We're also joined by Jung Kim, Associate Professor of the University of North Korean Studies. Very warm welcome to you both. And, well, we've got a lot of ground to cover, so let's start with you, Mr. Revere. Now, it seems that inter-Korean relations have been improving in recent days as the two Koreas reconnected their communication line on Monday. But we've seen this all before. Do you think this rapprochement is going to last?
Well, I think caution is in order in terms of any conclusion that things are actually getting better. The latest moves by North Korea, including the reopening of the communication links, are, in my view, purely tactical. They're part of Pyongyang's ongoing effort to try to take advantage of Seoul's eagerness, South Korea's eagerness, some call it desperation, to restart North-South dialogue, to hold another North-South summit at some point in the next several weeks or months, and to try to get Pyongyang to agree to an end-of-war declaration. So North Korea sees this eagerness on Seoul's part and is trying to take advantage of it.
And Dr. Kim, your thoughts on this? North Korea, it seems to have been extending an olive branch with conditions, of course, towards the South in recent days. What do you think the North really wants out of its engagement with South Korea? And do you think that this rapprochement is going to last?
So, first of all, the ultimate goal of the North Korea to make some rapprochement with the South Korea is to, first of all, driving a wedge between the South Korea and the United States, and that's first goal. And second, the driving a wedge between the progressives and the conservative in the South Korean domestic audiences here. So, as Mr. Evans said, this is purely tactical, the transition. So, I'm not that pessimistic about the prospect of this the rapprochement in the near future here.
Well, Mr. Rivera, mending ties with South Korea, for the North, it's tended to come as a step towards engagement with the US, which is its larger goal. What do you think the North wants to get out of engaging with Seoul this time around?
Well, I would say that the goal of Pyongyang is not to mend ties with South Korea. I think we can see the goals in two ways. Number one, there are a set of three goals, one of which is to try to tame, some people call it, South Korea, and get South Korea to respond positively to the North's initiatives. A second element here is to get South Korea to accept that North Korea's missile and nuclear tests are purely defensive. And we've heard that from North Korea, if you read between the lines of what they're actually asking South Korea for. And I think the North Koreans also want to get Seoul to end U.S.-South Korea military exercises by convincing Seoul to try to pressure Washington to end these exercises. But there's another level, a more fundamental level of goals that are operating here. And they were alluded to by my colleague, Professor Kim. The ultimate goal is indeed to drive a wedge between South Korea and Washington, to weaken the U.S.-South Korea alliance, end those exercises, and if possible, to actually end the alliance and get U.S. troops off the Korean peninsula. That is where North Korea is ultimately hoping to head.
And Dr. Kim, regime leader Kim Jong-un's sister Kim Yo-jong, she named the conditions that the North would, what we would want to see before considering resuming dialogue with the South, which were to end what it called double standards, hostile policies and hostile words and actions. What do you make of these three conditions that Kim Yo-jong demanded?
So that's the, the classic demand of North Korea whenever they try to reopen the dialogue with the South Korea. This is not that a surprise for the South Koreans, but at the same time, for the Moon Jae-in government, that is very impatient about the reopening of the dialogue with North Korea as the approaching to the end of the tenure here. So I think the North Korea tried to exploit this impatience of the Moon Jae-in government to get some the advantageous position in negotiating with the South Korea here.
And Mr. Rivera, it's clear that the North has been seeking recognition as a nuclear state, and it's, of course, as you pointed out earlier, that it's defended its latest provocations as a right to self-defense. And well, President Biden, he's been saying that he's said that he's not going to give Kim Jong-un the recognition that he wants. What is the significance of being recognized as a nuclear state for both sides? And do you think the North's antics are going to continue to get worse?
Well, I think the North Koreans want to be accepted, if not formally recognized, as a nuclear weapons power. I think it's important to understand here that Pyongyang believes that it can both keep its nuclear weapons and get rid of international sanctions. And Pyongyang's current approach towards Seoul and Washington aims to achieve this goal, if possible, with South Korea's assistance. And I think that explains, at least in part, the outreach to Seoul. And I think the North Koreans will continue to press forward along these lines, stopping short of major provocations like a nuclear test or a long-range ballistic missile test, because I think they realize that there's a tremendous downside to doing that, because it would blow up any efforts at diplomacy with the United States and possibly also with South Korea.
And Dr. Kim, both Seoul and Washington have been very eager to restart talks with the North, and they've their nuclear envoys, they've been speaking to each other and exploring a lot of options in how to go forward. But how far do you think South Korea and the US should go in order to engage with North Korea?
So I think the Biden administration have set a very clear path toward the condition of the resuming the U.S.-North Korea dialogue here. That is the unconditional for the as the condition here. So unconditional means here the Washington does not have any intention to make further concession to just resume the dialogue here. So that kind of some posture seems to the Pyongyang, as they said, some hostile policy here. So this is some parallel stance of U.S. and the North Korea. So I don't expect that in the near future, the United States and the North Korea will get together to have another round of the denuclearization negotiation in the near future here.
And Mr. Rivera, it's of course critical that the two allied countries, South Korea and the US, are always on the same page, but it seems that they aren't when it comes to the question of lifting sanctions on the North. What do you think the US's conditions would be for it to actually consider the idea of waiving sanctions?
I think the United States would need something very clear, very definitive, and something quite irreversible in terms of denuclearization in order to go down that path. I don't rule out the possibility that the United States might at some point during a forthcoming negotiation with North Korea agree to some sort of easing or snapback mechanism on easing sanctions. But in order to get to that point, we're going to have to see something very significant from the North Koreans in terms of movement on denuclearization. And thus far, not only have we not seen that, we've seen quite the opposite. North Korea is more committed to its nuclear weapons status than it's ever been before. I see no indication that the North Koreans have any interest in pursuing denuclearization.
And Dr. Kim, well, many would say that some engagement is better than no engagement at all. But, well, the question is the matter of time, really. And now that the inter-Korean communication channels have been restored, South Korean officials, they want to arrange video conference meetings between the two sides, and they want to obviously deepen their engagement. How far do you think they could go, especially before the presidential elections in South Korea next year?
So for North Korea, once again, this kind of the approach is somehow tactical in the sense that if the South Korea accept the conditions offered by North Korea, then the Pyongyang will continue this momentum of the dialogue here. But if the Pyongyang think that the North Korean government is no longer effective to maintaining some conditions that is made with the North Korea, then they suddenly lose the interest in maintaining this kind of connection here. So once again, I don't think that the Pyongyang recognized that the tenure of the Moon Jae-in government is approaching to end here. So any kind of commitment the Moon Jae-in government would make, that the duration of that commitment has to be very short. In that sense, the Pyongyang would not take the commitment by the Moon Jae-in government very seriously here.
Mr. Rivera, it's been one of President Moon Jae-in's goals to iron out an end-of-war declaration between the South and North, and other parties involved. But is the US as keen as the South to have an end-of-war declaration?
I think the two allies are indeed on separate pages here when it comes to an end-of-war declaration. I don't detect any enthusiasm in Washington for this idea. Simply declaring an end to the Korean War while North Korea remains a hostile nuclear-armed power would be quite foolish. It would essentially be accepting North Korea as a nuclear power in perpetuity. I don't think the United States is prepared to do that by declaring an end to the Korean War while North Korea remains a nuclear weapons state, which it in effect is. Would be locking in North Korea's nuclear status, and North Korea would no longer have an incentive to denuclearize. And so I don't think the United States is enthusiastic about that. And in addition, an end-of-war declaration would almost certainly be used by North Korea as a way of weakening the rationale for the U.S. military presence on the Korean Peninsula. and they would push very, very hard in the aftermath of such a declaration for the removal of U.S. forces and the end of the U.S. military presence and alliance with South Korea.
Well, Dr. Kim, meanwhile, Seoul officials, they remain quite optimistic about having high-level talks. And of course, there's been talk of the two Koreas entering the Beijing Olympics together. But would it be possible to create that kind of atmosphere and also the international support behind the sides in just a matter of months?
Of course, there's a possibility that the South Korea and North Korea have some new round of talks at the moment of the Beijing Olympics. Only if the North Korean athlete can join the event here. As you know, the North Korea is very, very hypersensitive to the COVID-19 pandemic, and they don't have the sufficient infrastructure, especially the public health infrastructure, to contain this pandemic here. So if North Korean could not get some effective solution for the danger of the pandemic thing here, then still the North Koreans are very, very vulnerable to the outside possibility of the infection here. So that's the possibility. But with the condition that the North Korean anyhow find out some effective solution for the COVID-19 pandemic. Otherwise it is just a wishful thinking of the, say, the Moon Jae-in government or the others here.
Mr. Rivera, North Korea's rather dovish stance seen in recent days comes amid some significant developments in the Indo-Pacific region. And while North Korea has shown opposition to the formation of the AUKUS Pact formed between the UK, the US and Australia, do you think this is going to push the regime closer to China?
It's hard to imagine North Korea getting any closer to China than it already is. I think North Korea is looking at this new development in the Asia-Pacific region with concern. Part of that concern is that it wants to maintain solidarity with its Chinese ally and partner. China is obviously very incensed about this new development, and so it's natural for North Korea to support the Chinese. But I also think that the North Koreans looking down the road at an increased naval capability by the Australians, a steadfast United States ally, also a country that fought in the Korean War. I think the North Koreans are looking at that capability with some concern that has nothing to do with China and a lot to do with themselves at some point in the future. So for those two reasons, I think the North Koreans are not enthusiastic, to say the least, about this new development.
And Dr. Kim, North Korea over the past months, it's been showcasing its new missile capabilities. How much of a threat does this pose to South Korea and the US?
Thus far, the North Korea's provocation, especially in regard with the ballistic missile, is not across the red line, so-called here. So, but at the same time, this kind of the ballistic missile test is the apparent violation of the resolution made by the UN Security Council here. So in that sense, this is the threat toward not only the South Korea but also for the international society as well. But at the same time, we don't have to be overly sensitive to this kind of the classic cycles of the provocation and the try to reopening the negotiation with the South Korea. So just the South Korean government need to have the robust different posture and do not overly sensitive about this sort of the provocation and just be patient about the future provocation so that we can have better position to reopening the negotiation with North Korea.
And Mr. Rivera, before we go, what do you think would be the correct response from the US government in light of these recent missile provocations?
Well, I think taking this to the Security Council, as the United States did the other day, and working with allies and partners, keeping the pressure on, making it extremely clear to the North Koreans that we find these activities unacceptable, and some of them are clearly violations of UN Security Council resolutions. I think the North Koreans need to be reminded of that. And I think the United States, as it just did just a day or so ago, call for all parties to keep the sanctions regime as strong as possible on North Korea. All those steps that have been taken, I think, are the right ones. And I just think the United States needs to continue to emphasize international solidarity and a refusal to accept North Korea as a de facto nuclear weapon state.
Well, that's all we have time for today. That was Evans Reverse, Senior Director at the Albridge Stonebridge Group, and John Kim, Associate Professor of the University of North Korean Studies. Thank you both so much for your insights.
Thank you.
Thank you.
South Korea's biggest film festival, the Busan International Film Festival, kicks off tonight in Korea's southeastern city. More than 200 films from 70 different countries will be screened, including series from over-the-top or OTT platforms. However, due to the pandemic, theaters will be limited to 50% their usual capacity. Our Choi Min-jung has the story.
The 26th Busan International Film Festival will start with the screening of South Korean director Im Sang-soo's Heaven to the Land of Happiness. The movie depicts the life of an old prisoner who escapes from prison after being diagnosed with a terminal illness, and a man who suffers from a rare disease but steals drugs because he has no money.
I could not hope for more because the movie has almost all the perfect requirements as the festival's opening film.
Anita, a Hong Kong film, will be screened as the closing film of the festival. This year, a total of 223 films are to be showcased, slightly fewer than in previous years. But the festival includes a vast number of movies created by renowned directors. A number of award-winning films from international film festivals such as Titan, which won the Palme d'Or at the Cannes Film Festival, and The Hand of God, which received the Grand Jury Prize at the Venice Film Festival, will also be presented. Japanese film director Yusuke Hamaguchi, who received attention for clinching awards at the Cannes and Berlin Film Festival, will take part in a special event which includes the screening of 2 of his celebrated movies, as well as a special talk with South Korea's Bong Joon-ho.
Director Yusuke Hamaguchi was originally a big fan of director Bong Joon-ho. He even gave a movie commentary on the memories of a murder at the Busan International Film Festival.
Also drawing attention is the on-screen section, which shows dramas released on OTT platforms. The Netflix series Hellbound and My Name will be screened. The film festival, which runs until the 15th, will be joined by not only South Korean filmmakers, but also dozens of foreign directors. Due to the pandemic, only half of the capacity seating in theaters will be available. However, the opening and closing ceremonies and other on-site events will take place as usual. Choi Min-jung, Arirang News.
The head of the International Monetary Fund says the global body is trimming its forecast for global growth in 2021 in a virtual address on Tuesday. IMF Managing Director Kristalina Georgieva said IMF economists are less optimistic about their previous outlook in July when they projected a solid rebound of 6%. She attributed this to the continued global surge of the Delta variant, as well as stronger than expected inflation that's been exacerbated by logjams in global supply chains. However, the IMF chief remained confident at least 40% of the world's population will be vaccinated against COVID-19 by the end of the year and 70% by the first half of 2022. South Korea's foreign exchange reserves hit an all-time high in September, increasing for the 3rd straight month. The Bank of Korea says FX reserves, a barometer of financial stability, hit almost $464 billion US. This is up more than $40 million from the previous record in August. The central bank attributed the rise to increased profits from investments in foreign assets. As of the end of September, South Korea had the world's 8th largest FX reserves.
The U.S. National Security Advisor will hold talks with China's top diplomat in Switzerland on Wednesday to boost communications amid rising tensions. The White House said the meeting between Jake Sullivan and Yang Jiechi follows up on U.S. President Biden's call with the Chinese president last month as Washington continues to seek to responsibly manage the competition between the U.S. and China. This comes at a time of heightened tensions over a range of issues, including Taiwan and trade. This will be Sullivan's first face-to-face meeting with Yang since the two met in Alaska in March. In sports, South Korea's Lee Sang-soo has won gold at the Asian Table Tennis Championships in Doha. The world number 22 beat his opponent from Chinese Taipei by 3-2, claiming his first Asian singles title. It's also South Korea's first men's table tennis gold at the Asian Championships. Also on Tuesday, South Korea won gold in women's doubles. Jeon Ji-hee and Shin Yu-bin defeated a duo from Hong Kong.
Let's take a look at what's going on in the world now. Beating Tom Cruise in the race to become the first actor to shoot a movie in space, a Russian actress and a film director arrived at the International Space Station on Tuesday as their Soyuz MS-19 spacecraft docked at the ISS. Yulia Peresild, who will hold the honor of becoming the first actor to film in space, could not hold back her excitement, saying she still feels like she's dreaming. The two reached the ISS ahead of Cruise, who plans to blast off on a SpaceX rocket for a Hollywood film that was announced last year by NASA. Peresild and Shipenko will spend the next 12 days on the space station, filming parts for the film The Challenge. In the film, the Russian actress plays a doctor who is asked to travel to the space station to save a cosmonaut's life. Over in China, with the Beijing Winter Olympic Games taking place next February, the final round of 15 testing events and activities to test COVID-19 prevention measures began on Tuesday. For the next 3 months until December 31st, test events will be held in 8 ice and snow competition venues in Beijing and Zhangjiakou. These will also include 10 international competitions, 3 international training weeks, as well as 2 domestic test events with coordination from the IOC. It's estimated that 2,000 international athletes, sports experts, and IOC officials will be at hand for the events. The massive testing event is part of the requirements by the International Olympic Committee as well as the International Paralympic Committee before the official competitions begin. According to an official in charge, there are 3 major measures that need to be in place. These include strengthened remote prevention and control by encouraging overseas personnel to complete their vaccination process and COVID-19 testing before arrival, as well as implementing closed-loop management, enforcing a strict quarantine and inspection process for all who arrive in China. And finally, all participants are to wear masks and strictly implement prevention and control requirements. The Beijing 2022 Winter Games will take place from February 4th to the 20th next year, with the Paralympics to follow from March 4th to the 13th. It has taken over 13 years, but Coldplay is back at the top of the Billboard's Hot 100 chart thanks to their collaboration with BTS. Coldplay, on their official Twitter page, also congratulated each member of BTS as My Universe is the South Korean group's 6th #1 in just a little over a year. Coldplay also thanked their fans, as well as ARMY, for making it possible for the song to top the charts on its debut. BTS responded on their Twitter, saying it was an honor to be a part of it all, while congratulating the band. My Universe is Coldplay's first chart topper since Viva La Vida back in June 2008. 이승재, Arirang News.
Good morning. Those of us in central parts of the country in Gyeongsang-Bukdo provinces will need an umbrella today. For now, the capital region in Gangwon-do province are seeing spotty showers, while fog is forming in southern provinces. So eastern parts of Gangwon-do province will see rain of up to 60 millimeters. The capital will see on and off drizzle during the day, but southern provinces will enjoy another sunny and warm day. And unseasonably warm temperatures in southern provinces will continue, especially in the southwest, with highs hovering around 30 degrees Celsius. But those of us in rain-affected regions will notice temperatures dropping 3 to 4 degrees lower this afternoon. Morning temperatures are a few notches lower than the same time yesterday at 19 degrees Celsius here in the capital. And highs in Seoul will be right around the norms, but southern regions will have highs that are 3 to 6 degrees higher. With that, here's a look at the weather conditions around the globe.
Well, that's where we're going to leave it for now. We'll be back at 8 a.m. Korea time tomorrow with another edition of New Day at Arirang. Thank you ever so much to our reporters. Oh Seong, of course, who brings us global insight every day, as well as our experts for their in-depth analysis.
And thanks to you for watching. Hope you have a wonderful rest of the day, wherever in the world you are watching us. Mark will be back with more news at 10 a.m. Korea time. Goodbye.
Goodbye.